The first time Michael saw the painting, he didn't remember blinking. It was buried in a dusty antique shop at the edge of town, surrounded by things nobody wanted but couldn't quite throw away. The portrait was large, nearly life-size, and yet she seemed alive. A woman dressed in a dark emerald gown, her skin smooth like porcelain, her lips slightly parted as if caught mid-confession. But what truly arrested him were her eyes, those unblinking, watchful eyes that seemed to follow him, not just across the room but into his thoughts. She didn't look posed, she looked paused. Her expression held something between heartbreak and hope, like a secret that had waited far too long to be told. The tag hanging loosely from the corner of the frame had no price, just 2 words scribbled in fading ink, "Not for sale." And yet, as Michael stood there staring, he could swear she breathed. What makes a man fall in love with a face frozen in paint? And what if that face never changed? Time has ways of stealing beauty, softening memories, bending truths. But this woman, locked in oils and shadows, defied all of it. Is it possible for a heart to remember someone it never met? Michael didn't believe in ghosts, not really. But he would soon learn that some souls are too stubborn to stay dead, and some loves too deep to be forgotten. He returned to the shop the next morning, but it was closed, windows boarded. No sign of the man who had let him in the day before. No trace of the shop at all. Just a weathered "For Lease" sign, barely hanging by one nail. Confused and strangely desperate, he searched the town records, spoke to nearby shop owners. Nobody remembered the store being open. Nobody knew a man named Elijah. The owner, Michael, swore had let him in. And the painting, no one had ever seen it. Michael became obsessed. He painted her from memory, over and over, filling canvas after canvas with her face. Each time, the features came easier, like his hand wasn't painting, but remembering. Her face haunted him in dreams, in the silence between his thoughts. He stopped going to work. Friends called and stopped calling. His apartment became a shrine to the woman no one believed existed. And still, the question tore at him. Why had she looked so real and so familiar? One night, while sifting through his grandfather's belongings in the attic of his childhood home, Michael found a small hand-bound journal wrapped in cloth and tied with a ribbon that had turned brittle with age. The handwriting inside was elegant, looping. The first entry was dated 1902. The final page stopped mid-sentence, and the last full words read, "Her name is Ilara, and I swear she has not aged a day since the war." The shock almost made him drop the book. His grandfather had never spoken of a woman named Ilara, but as Michael flipped back through the pages, sketch after sketch of the same woman appeared. His woman, the one from the painting. Notes in the margins detailed sightings of her across decades, cities, even continents. Always the same face, always the same eyes. The more Michael read, the more the world began to tilt sideways. It wasn't just obsession anymore. It was legacy. A haunting passed down through generations, a mystery left unsolved, and a warning that pulsed through his veins like a second heartbeat. Find her, or she will find you. Driven by an urgency he couldn't explain, Michael followed the trail from his grandfather's journal to an abandoned estate outside Marseille. The building stood like a skeleton beneath ivy and rot, its bones creaking with the wind. In the parlor, covered in dust and silence, hung another portrait, this time of a man. But next to it, nailed into the wall as if to anchor it there forever, was her. The same woman, untouched by time, waiting. As he stepped closer, the temperature dropped. The room grew still. Michael reached out a trembling hand and placed it against the painting's frame. That's when her eyes moved, just slightly, but enough to make his breath hitch in his throat. He stumbled back, and then her lips curled, not into a smile, but something darker, like recognition. He ran, through the halls, out into the fading daylight, not looking back. But in the days that followed, the world didn't return to normal. He started to see her on trains, in reflections, in the background of news reports. Once he swore she stood across the street from his apartment, unmoving, until he blinked, and she was gone. Sleep became impossible. His own reflection started to warp, stretch into something unfamiliar. And worst of all, her voice. He began to hear it, soft at first, whispering his name from corners of empty rooms, then pleading, then accusing. It wasn't love he was feeling anymore. It was a reckoning. Michael hadn't spoken to anyone in days. He avoided mirrors, ignored calls, left his television unplugged and his curtains drawn. Every flicker of shadow felt like her. His apartment had become more than a sanctuary. It was a cage. And the portrait, though never physically there, had carved itself into every wall, every silence. Her face had rooted itself into the space behind his eyes. He didn't tell anyone about the journal, not even Bethany, his older sister, who had always been his lifeline after their parents passed. Beth had her own life in Vermont now, a quiet bookstore, 2 kids, a golden retriever named Jules. But even if he wanted to explain it all, how could he? There's a woman. She never ages. She's in a painting. Our grandfather may have known her. She looked at me. I think she's following me. Even in his mind, it sounded like madness. And maybe it was. But on the 3rd night, without sleep, a memory rose uninvited. Michael, age 10, hiding beneath the dining room table as his grandfather argued with his mother. He had never remembered the words before, only the tension. But now, the voice played clear as a bell. "You let that portrait back into this house, Margaret, and you'll doom this family again. I told you what she is." Again. Michael's pulse stumbled. That word echoed through his chest like a dull drum. Again. Something had happened before, something his grandfather tried to erase. He opened the journal once more, hunting for any mention of Alara's origin. But all it gave were fragments. "I met her near Florence, 1918. She never sleeps. She remembers things I haven't told her yet." He booked a flight to Florence the next day. At the airport, he hesitated. Not out of fear, but because, in his bones, he already knew this trip wouldn't just bring answers, it would change the question. Somewhere deep inside, he was terrified of learning that his life had never truly been his. The streets of Florence breathed history, so much beauty wrapped around so many broken things. He wandered the narrow alleys of the San Frediano district, following the names and coordinates scribbled in pencil across the journal's yellowing pages. Eventually, he arrived at a crumbling palazzo, ivy choking its outer walls, a rusted gate half hanging from its hinges. A brass plaque beside the door read, "Dr. Amara Whitlock, Antiquarian and Archivist." The woman who answered looked barely 40, though her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen centuries turn like pages in a book. She wore a silk scarf tied at her throat, and her voice was low, precise, like someone used to being listened to carefully. "You're not the first Weston to come here," she said before he could speak, "but you might be the last." Michael froze. "You knew my grandfather?" Amara nodded slowly. He was in love with her, too. The room went silent. I don't understand. How could she be real? What is she?" Amara motioned for him to sit. "Alara is not a ghost, not in the traditional sense, nor is she a figment. She's what some used to call a time-bound echo. She's real, Michael, but not fixed to the now. Her body doesn't obey the laws yours does. She moves across decades as if walking between rooms." Michael stared. "But why me?" She looked at him with something between pity and fear. "Because you carry a piece of her story, and now she's ready to finish it." Before he left her office, Amara handed him a box, sealed with wax, no markings. "Your grandfather left this with me, said only you would know when to open it." In the hotel that night, Michael sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling as he broke the seal. Inside, there was a photograph, sepia-toned and curled at the edges. It showed his grandfather in uniform, World War I. Standing beside him, Ilara, her hand on his chest, her face unchanged. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, 1918. She said, "I'd die before I remembered." There was also a key and an address in Pennsylvania. Michael didn't sleep. He flew home the next morning. The house in Pennsylvania stood at the edge of a forest forgotten by time. The key fit the front door. Dust coated every surface. In the upstairs hallway, behind layers of torn wallpaper, Michael found a hidden door. Inside was a study, dark, stale, untouched. And on the far wall above the fireplace hung a painting. Her, but different. She wasn't alone. In this version, Ilara stood beside a man Michael didn't recognize. Dark-haired, sharp-jawed, his hand clutching hers. But what stole Michael's breath was that the man looked exactly like him. Not similar, identical. He stumbled backward, nausea rising, and then he noticed something else. This portrait had no signature, but in the corner, scratched in with something jagged, were 4 words, "I'll find you again?" Michael couldn't remember how long he sat there, staring at the man who wore his face in a century-old painting. Time seemed suspended, like the moment itself refused to move forward until he accepted what it was trying to say. Ilara had known someone who looked exactly like him. No, was him. The same eyes, the same slight cleft in the chin, even the same faint scar above the brow that Michael had gotten from falling off a bike at age 7. It wasn't resemblance, it was reflection. For a moment he doubted his own timeline. Was he losing his mind, being pulled into some inherited delusion? Or was this deeper, something rooted not just in obsession, but in blood? The room seemed to shrink around him, walls pressing in. He reached for the journal again, flipping through its fragile pages until he found a single line he'd skimmed before, but never absorbed. Ilara doesn't find people by chance. She follows her echoes. That night, sleep came like a trapdoor. In his dream, he stood in a corridor of endless mirrors, each reflecting a different version of himself, some older, some younger, some dressed in uniforms, others in clothes he'd never worn. Ilara was always there, just behind him in every reflection, her hand outstretched but never quite touching. Her mouth moved, but no sound reached him. And then, in one mirror near the end, he saw something else. Not his own reflection, but the man from the portrait, alive, breathing, bleeding from the chest. Michael woke up screaming. In the dim morning light, he looked at the photo from the box again. Ilara's face, that same impossible calm, the same eyes. But now, something about her expression felt different. Not timeless, trapped. It was a look of someone waiting to be rescued or warned. He called Bethany. It took her 4 rings to answer. Her voice was groggy. "Michael, are you okay?" He paused. "Do you remember Granddad talking about a woman named Ilara?" Silence. Then slowly, "Why are you asking me this now?" Michael stood frozen by the window. "Because I think she's still alive, and I think she's looking for me." Bethany's voice dropped to a whisper. "I had a dream last night. I saw her." Michael's breath caught. She was standing in our childhood bedroom wearing green. She didn't speak, but she looked so sad. And I woke up crying. Michael closed his eyes. It wasn't just him anymore. Back in Florence, Amara had told him something else, something he hadn't yet accepted. Ilara didn't just appear to people. She remembered them. And when she did, time folded around her like a curtain being drawn. It meant Michael wasn't the first version of himself she had known. He wasn't even the second. Driven by an impulse he couldn't explain, Michael returned to the hidden room in the Pennsylvania house. This time, he looked behind the painting. Taped to the back of the frame was a letter in parchment, sealed with wax and marked only by the initials E.L. He broke it open. "To the one who finds this version of me, I've waited. Through winters that forgot how to end, through wars that changed your face but never your heart. I don't know who you are now, but I will know you when I see your eyes again." Michael's hands trembled. "Time has punished me for remembering too much. If I find you once more, promise me, don't run. There is something I must return to you." At the bottom, barely legible, was a final sentence. "We were together in 1874, 1918, 1943, and you never remembered me." Michael's stomach dropped. There was no record of him or any of his relatives being alive in those years, and yet he remembered nothing, and she remembered everything. Over the next few days, he became obsessed with locating every known portrait of Ilara across time. He reached out to art historians, underground collectors, antique dealers. Most laughed him off. A few responded with vague interest. But one, a woman named Clara Monroe, an archivist in Boston, sent him a photo of a piece she'd restored 3 years ago. The woman in the painting was unmistakable. Same Ilara, different setting. It had been dated 1847, and the artist's signature at the bottom read, J. Weston. Michael froze. He didn't know of any Weston ancestor who was an artist. But his father had once mentioned an old relative named Jonah who'd died young, unmarried, forgotten. Now it seemed Jonah hadn't been forgotten at all. He'd painted her, and possibly loved her. The Weston men had all seen her. That was the pattern, and each had been drawn to her, whether by fate or something deeper. But why? Michael booked a train to Boston. The museum was small, tucked between an old church and a shuttered theater. Clara Monroe greeted him with cautious interest, her office filled with sunlight and the soft scent of old books. "You said you're related to the painter?" Michael nodded. "I think so. But more than that, I think I've seen her too." Clara blinked. "You and every man who's walked through that door. There's something about her. It's like she waits for someone but never says who." Michael stepped toward the painting, displayed under glass. Ilara sat on a garden bench, light falling on her shoulders, her hands clasped in her lap. She didn't smile, but her expression wasn't sorrowful either. It was resigned. "She looks like she already knows how the story ends," Clara whispered. Michael nodded slowly. Maybe she does. When he touched the glass, something shifted. The lights flickered. The air turned thick. And just for a second, Ilara's eyes met his, not through paint, but through time. And then he heard her voice. Not in the room, in his head. "Jonah!" He stumbled back, heart pounding, vision spinning. Clara grabbed his arm. "Are you okay?" Michael couldn't answer, because in that moment, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. Michael took the next few days to distance himself from anything familiar. He stopped checking his phone, stopped reading the news. His mind felt like a scratched vinyl record, repeating phrases, faces, colors. Every time he tried to fall asleep, her voice would rise through the dark like a thread pulled from another life. "Jonah, come back to me." He rented a small room in an inn just outside Concord, somewhere quiet, where time moved slowly. The kind of place with uneven floorboards, faded quilts, and a cat that didn't belong to anyone, but always appeared at sunset. He needed space, but distance only made her voice clearer. He found himself sketching again, not just Ilara, but himself, or the other versions of him. Men who looked like him in old uniforms, old suits, old sorrow. He drew them younger, older, some smiling, others with blank expressions. But their eyes, those never changed. It was always his gaze, looking out from different centuries, different hearts, different regrets. The final sketch was different. He didn't draw it consciously. It came from a place beyond his thinking mind, a vision. Ilara standing barefoot in a forest clearing, a silver necklace in her hand. Behind her, 5 identical men, all him, all silent. And in the sky above, a moon cracked straight down the middle. That same night, he received a call from Bethany. "I had another dream," she whispered. "Only this time, I think it wasn't a dream." Michael gripped the phone tighter. "What happened?" "I was in the old cabin, the one Grandpa used to take us to. I saw you standing at the lake's edge, but it wasn't you." "Not really. You were dressed like someone from the 1800s. And Ilara was there too. She was crying. You kept saying the same thing over and over. I forgot. I'm sorry. I forgot again." Michael's throat went dry. "Beth, did she say anything to you?" "Yes," Beth whispered. "She told me to remind you of the locket." Michael froze. He didn't remember telling Beth about the necklace and the drawing. In fact, he'd never mentioned it to anyone. After ending the call, he opened the old box Amara had given him. He hadn't looked beneath the photograph before. Carefully, he lifted the false bottom. There it was, a small silver locket, cold to the touch. When he opened it, there was a tiny portrait inside of Ilara, not painted, photographed, but the date etched inside the metal was 1863. He stared at the tiny face for a long time. Then something occurred to him. What if he hadn't simply inherited his grandfather's obsession? What if this wasn't just memory? What if it was reincarnation? The thought terrified him. It felt absurd, like something stolen from a novel or late-night documentary. But every answer he chased only made room for more question. And every encounter with Ilara through dreams, through portraits, through time, kept bringing him closer to something that felt inevitable. He decided to return to the old cabin Bethany had mentioned. It had been abandoned for years, overgrown with ivy and moss, the wood grayed by seasons and silence, but inside it felt preserved, as if someone had been keeping watch. The air was cool, still scented with pine and ash. On the mantel, he found an envelope addressed to J.W. His hands trembled as he opened it. "You told me once that if I ever found you again, I should let you go. But I can't. I won't, even if you don't remember me, even if your soul is borrowed by another name." You promised to come back one last time. Please, Jonah, keep that promise. I've waited so long, I'm starting to forget my own name. Michael folded the letter gently and held it to his chest. Outside, a storm was building. As he stared out across the lake, the same one from Bethany's dream, he saw a woman, standing still, wearing green, hair curled against her shoulders, face calm, Ilara. He stepped onto the porch slowly, heart threatening to tear itself apart. Each step toward her felt like walking into a memory that hadn't happened yet. She didn't move, not until he was only a few feet away. "I told you I'd find you again," she whispered. Michael couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "I've watched you in so many lives," she continued, voice fragile. "You never stay. Sometimes you die young. Sometimes you marry someone else. Sometimes you forget me entirely." His voice cracked. "Why?" She looked up at him, eyes glassy. "Because your soul is restless. You never belonged to one time. Not really. You came to me across centuries, but you always left before the ending." Michael stepped closer. "But I'm here now." Her hand touched his chest, right over his heartbeat. "Then this time, don't forget me." And before he could answer, the sky opened up. Rain poured, thunder cracked, but neither of them moved, because for the first time in all their stolen lives, they were both awake. They stayed in the storm until the rain stopped pretending it could wash away centuries. Neither of them spoke. They just stood there, breathing the same cold air, watching each other like strangers, caught in a memory they both pretended not to share. Later, inside the cabin, Michael lit the fireplace while Ilara sat on the old velvet armchair as if she had never left it. She moved slowly, gracefully, her fingertips trailing across familiar wood as though they still carried the warmth of another time. Michael watched her in silence. Every question inside him felt like it already had an answer, but he was afraid to hear it. "Ilara," he said, his voice barely above a breath. "Who am I to you?" She turned to face him, her eyes no longer distant. "You've been my husband, my brother, my stranger, my savior, my undoing, but most of all, you've been my beginning." Over and over again, he felt dizzy. "That's not possible." Ilara's lips twitched into something like a smile, but it didn't last. "You think time moves in one direction. You think your life is a single thread, but threads fray, Michael. They tangle, they loop, and sometimes they snap." She stood and walked toward him slowly. "Every version of you has carried the same soul, and every time I found you, even when I tried not to, even when you told me not to." He looked into her eyes, searching for a lie. There wasn't one. "So why now?" he asked. "Why this version of me? Why did you wait this long?" She hesitated. "Because I'm running out of time." That word stung. "But you don't age." "I'm not aging," she said softly, "but I'm fading." Michael stepped forward. "What does that mean?" "It means this is the last time," she said, her voice trembling. "After this, there won't be another version of you, or me. The echoes end here." A thick silence filled the cabin. It wasn't grief. It was something older than grief, like a farewell that had been rehearsed in lifetimes. He sat down across from her. "What do we do now?" She pulled the locket from her pocket and placed it on the table between them. "You remember this?" He nodded. "I saw it in a sketch. Then I found it." Ilara opened it slowly, revealing a second compartment. Inside was a small folded note. Michael picked it up. It was in his handwriting, but he had never written it. "If I forget again, tell me this. I loved you more when I didn't remember, because then it wasn't fate, it was choice." He looked up at her, speechless. "I found that after your last death," Ilara said. "You left it in my hand, and I've kept it ever since." Michael stood. "Then maybe that's the answer. Maybe this time We stay. We fight it. We break the cycle. Ilara smiled, but her eyes were glassy. Do you think we haven't tried? In 1918, you married me. You died 4 days later in a trench. In 1943, you ran away with me. A car crash. 1967, heart failure. 2003, you didn't recognize me at all. She walked over and touched his cheek. You can't outrun fate when it's written into your blood. Michael's breath trembled. Then maybe we face it together. Outside, the wind howled again, but this time it wasn't natural. It felt summoned. The cabin shuddered, the fire dimmed, and Ilara closed her eyes. It's starting, she whispered. They're coming to take me back. Michael stepped in front of her. Who? She opened her eyes. The ones who let me stay this long. The ones who guard the space between timelines. I made a deal, Michael, to keep finding you, to keep remembering. And now they want their end. The light bulbs flickered. The shadows in the corners grew too still. Michael took her hand. I'm not letting them take you. She smiled faintly. You don't have a choice. Yes, he said firmly, eyes locked on hers. I do. She looked down, and for the first time in all his visions, dreams, sketches, she cried. Real tears, not eternal, not cursed, just human. And he realized something in that moment. She wasn't immortal. She had only been waiting for someone to remember her deeply enough to make her real again. Someone who didn't love her because fate said so, but because he chose to. Michael didn't understand how the wind inside the cabin could scream louder than the storm outside. The windows pulsed. The air grew heavy, thick with something he couldn't name. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. The walls cracked, but not from the wind, from something deeper, from within. Ilara stepped back from him, her hand trembling. They're not creatures, they're not demons, they're rules. What do they want? Michael asked, his voice barely audible over the growing hum that filled the room like pressure in the ears. To restore balance, she whispered. They let me bend time, twist memory, cross lifetimes, just to find you. But they warned me. If I stayed too long, if I tried to change what was already written, they'd come for me. Michael reached for her. Then run. We'll go somewhere, anywhere. She shook her head. It's not about place. They find me through memory, through repetition. They follow the soul's echo, and now they know you remember. A crack formed in the cabin ceiling, a jagged line that bled light, not daylight. Something colder, pale, and still. Ilara, Michael began, but his voice cut off as the floor under his feet shifted, like breathing wood. I don't want to forget again, she said, stepping toward him, clutching the locket. I don't want to be another unfinished memory in your blood. I want you to remember me when I'm gone. You won't be, Michael said. I swear you won't. But the wind turned to voices. They didn't speak in words. They echoed in him, pulling at his ribs, his spine, his thoughts, showing him visions of every life he'd lived, every time he'd let go, every promise he broke and couldn't recall. And then a choice, not spoken, felt. Let her go and live. Hold her and vanish with her. He looked at Ilara, her figure trembling like candlelight in wind. She smiled through tears. Don't die for me again. I'm not dying, he said. I'm choosing. And then he pulled her close, arms around her as the world began to dissolve. The walls peeled into dust. The roof cracked open to the quiet white above. Light poured into his skin like water into stone. The room vanished. The storm stopped. Silence, but they weren't gone. They were standing in a field, empty, golden, endless. No sky, no horizon, just warmth and silence. Michael looked at her. Ilara blinked in confusion. Where are we? I don't know, he said, breathless. But you're still here. She touched her face. Then her arms. She laughed, soft, breathy. I'm not fading. He turned, expecting something behind them. But there was nothing, just a long wooden easel and a blank canvas. A paintbrush lay across the stool, dry. Ilara stepped toward it, picked it up. She dipped it into the air, and it came out wet, with color. Michael watched as she painted a line, then another. A horizon, trees, a figure, him. You said I always stayed in portraits, she said, voice low. Maybe this time you will. Michael stepped beside her, took her hand. Then we'll stay together. She nodded, and as she painted the world around them back into existence, One soft stroke at a time, the timekeepers faded. The cycle broke because they didn't remember a past. They were finally writing a future. The brush moved slowly in Ilara's hand, as if remembering what the world used to feel like. Trees bloomed into being with soft strokes of green and gold. The sky opened above them in tones of lavender, like dusk had learned to exhale. Michael stood at her side, not guiding her, not questioning, just watching her bring life where there had been nothing. For the first time, he felt no pull from the past, no gravity dragging him into memories that weren't his. Here, in this place outside of time, he wasn't haunted by his own reflection. He wasn't a copy of a man who had loved her before. He simply was. And she, finally, was not alone. Hours, or what passed for them, slipped by quietly. When Ilara stopped painting, the field was lush and full. A small lake shimmered nearby, birds circling above. It didn't look like anywhere they'd ever lived. It looked like everywhere they had ever dreamed of being. She turned to him. "Do you feel it?" He nodded. "Peace." "I've never painted peace before," she whispered, her voice trembling, always longing. Always trying to freeze something that was slipping away. Michael brushed a strand of hair from her face. Maybe because peace was never part of the cycle, until now. They sat together beneath a willow tree she'd created just for that reason. Its shade cooled the skin. Its roots felt steady like truth. There was no sun overhead, just a gentle light that hummed like memory without weight. He held her hand, fingers interlaced, the way they never could in any of their other lives. "I used to wonder," he said softly, "if the feeling I had when I first saw your portrait was madness or memory. And now?" He smiled. "Now I know it was neither. It was a beginning." She leaned into him. "I don't want this to end." He looked around. "Then let's not let it." But the stillness trembled. A ripple in the quiet. Far off, near the edge of the painted trees, the color began to drip, just slightly. A line of green slid downward like a tear, distorting the forest she had created. Ilara's breath caught. Michael stood. More drips followed. The lake trembled. The light flickered. "No," she said, standing quickly. "They can't still be watching." Michael grabbed her hands. "You said we broke the cycle." "I thought we did." The paint bled faster now. Branches sagged. The sky cracked. Michael turned to the canvas, still blank. He looked back at Ilara. "You painted everything, except us." She stared at him. Then realization. They didn't trap me in the world. They trapped me in the painting. The only way I existed across time was as art. Michael's mind raced. "So if we're not on the canvas, if we aren't part of the painting, we fade with it." The forest around them groaned. She grabbed the brush. "No, don't," Michael said. "If you put us in the painting, won't we be trapped again? Frozen like before?" Ilara looked down at the brush, then at him. "Maybe, or maybe we won't be erased. Maybe that's the only way we survive." She hesitated. Michael touched her shoulder. "We survived lifetimes apart. Maybe one eternity together is worth the price." She didn't answer. She turned to the canvas and painted the two of them, sitting beneath the willow, faces soft, holding hands, not statuesque, not immortal, just present. The moment she finished the final stroke, the world stilled. The bleeding stopped, the color returned, and then quiet. Michael looked around. The trees were stable. The sky was whole again. Ilara dropped the brush. A breeze passed through them, gentle, real. And then he blinked, and he was standing in a museum. The lights above buzzed faintly. Visitors whispered behind him, but the painting in front of him held his gaze completely. It was the same field, the willow tree, the sky, and in the center, two figures. Him, her. He took a step forward. The plaque beneath it read, "The Final Portrait, Anonymous, Unknown, Date." Someone tapped his shoulder. He turned. It was Bethany. "I didn't know you were coming today," she said, surprised. He blinked. "What?" She smiled. "You said you had to go back to the cabin. I got worried. You've been distant lately." He looked back at the painting. Ilara's eyes seemed to shimmer. "Do you remember her?" he asked Bethany. "From when we were kids?" Bethany tilted her head. "You mean the woman in the portrait Grandpa used to hide?" "Yeah. She always scared me. You used to stare at her for hours." He nodded slowly. "She wasn't trying to scare us." Bethany touched his arm. You okay?" He looked at her, then at the painting, and smiled. "I think I finally am." As they walked away, he turned one last time to look at Alara. Her painted figure sat still beneath the willow tree, but just before he turned the corner, she blinked. Did you enjoy this story? Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Enjoy and comment below about your experience listening to this story.